So for today's deep dive, I want you to imagine waking up before dawn. And not because an alarm clock is going off, right? But because the cold, hard floor beneath you is literally physically demanding that you kneel.
Right.
I mean, imagine living in this valley where a child laughing is considered this dangerous offense, like a literal default on a debt to the mountain. Today, we are looking at a stack of sources that, well, they start out as a grueling, almost mundane farming memoir, and then they violently devolve into this terrifying tale of ancient mud demons and like deep psychological survival.
It's a profound bait and switch. I mean, when we think of 19th century rural farm life, we generally expect, pastoral meditation on nature.
Right, like a cozy, simple living kind of thing.
Exactly. We anticipate themes of the dignity of planting seeds or maybe a grounding connection to the changing seasons. And the agrarian grit is definitely there in these texts, but it serves an entirely different master.
Yeah, and I was completely taken in by that setup. I mean, I'm reading these detailed accounts of a 19th century Japanese valley, and I'm looking at descriptions of terraced rice paddies built like, what was the quote? Like 100 small shelves of water.
Yes, exactly.
And I am practically feeling the mud between my toes, visualizing the sluice gates, the miso controlling the flow of the water, because farm and country life, it has a lot in common across the world.
Oh, absolutely. The universality of that layer.
Right. And this grueling, back-breaking daily labor just felt incredibly relatable. Like, I thought I knew exactly what kind of journey we were on. I was expecting this quiet meditation, but then you turn a page and the quiet meditation just vanishes.
It's gone.
Gone. And you are suddenly staring into the black, gaping mouth of a mud demon rising out of the rice paddy.
Which is quite the tonal shift.
To put it mildly. Which I guess brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Because before we wade into the mud and the monsters with you all listening, we really have to orient ourselves. So what is Hiaikan, in the simplest terms you can manage without reducing its power?
Well, literally, Hiaikan translates to sorrow, love, return.
Sorrow, love, return.
Yeah.
God.
But the true nature of the text, it lies in its framework. This isn't a standard novel by any means. It's framed as a family telling. So an oral storytelling ritual taking place in a very specific, highly charged environment.
Right.
We had old grandmother, Oba, and an old grandfather, Oji. And they are gathered around the low fire of the nagahibachi, the traditional heating hearth, with, get this, 14 or 15 of their grandchildren.
I mean, that is just a massive audience for a bedtime story.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it isn't a bedtime story to lull them to sleep.
Right. Not at all.
No. Oji is telling a fable about a nameless craftsman, his wife, and their 5 unnamed children. And he's telling this specifically to explain the terrifying forces, these Oni, that are literally waiting in the dark fields outside their physical house at that very moment.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. The story is essentially a survival manual that's just, disguised as a myth.
Yeah, because the environment itself is the primary antagonist, or, well, at least the primary instigator of all this tension. And that is what grabbed me so deeply in the opening pages. The sheer, unrelenting reality of the setting, it doesn't pull a single punch.
No, it really doesn't.
Like, we open before dawn, inside the mind of the grandmother, Oba, and she isn't waking up feeling refreshed or stretching lazily. Her body is literally cataloging its pain just to tell her what time it is.
The physiology of her morning routine is stunning. I mean, the text describes how her left hip clicks like a stone lodged in a joint.
Ugh, you can almost hear it.
Right. And her spine reports its ledger like a woman counting beads she has counted for 40 years. She doesn't need a rooster crowing to wake her up.
Yeah, pain is her alarm clock.
Exactly. Pain reports in a very specific chronological order, and that's how a body past 60 in this valley knows it's time to get to work.
And she articulates the valley's first law so perfectly. The rule that the floor decides when you wake, not your mind.
Yes.
You don't just decide to rise. The floor demands that you arrive into the day in these agonizing stages. Kneel, hand to the post, wait, stand. It's this total submission to the environment.
Which introduces us to the valley's conception of wa, or harmony.
Right, which is completely different from how we think of it.
Completely. Oba is actually mentally drafting a letter to her sister in Edo, the capital city, and she's frustrated because city people fundamentally misunderstand what harmony is.
Yeah, they think it's just, peace and quiet.
Right. They view it as peace, tranquility, people getting along, just pleasant vibes.
But Oba shatters that illusion. She has this line that, I had to read it 3 times. She says, laughter was already the sound harmony makes right before it breaks.
It's a chilling line.
Hmm.
Because in this brutal environment, harmony is a kari, which means a debt.
A debt.
It is an invisible, unforgiving mortgage attached to every single terrace of water in that valley. It's a burden passed down like a scar you didn't earn, but, well, you cannot refuse it.
You just have to carry it.
Exactly. The villagers pay that debt daily in grueling physical labor. So, if you are laughing, you are likely not working. And if you are not working, you are actively defaulting on a metaphysical loan to the mountain.
And we see that default happen almost immediately, right, with two of the grandchildren, Bo and Chibi.
Right.
And actually, a quick piece of context for you listening. Children in this valley aren't given real names until they survive at least 6 winters.
Which tells you everything you need to know about the mortality rate.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Giving a true name to a child only to call it back from a small grave, it would unbalance the grief of the valley, so they use nicknames.
Right.
So Bo and Chibi are supposed to be weeding the wintergreens and tending the northern sluice gate, but they're kids.
They're just being children.
Right. They're playing. Bo is carrying the bamboo water pole like a toy sword, and Chibi is chasing dragonflies. And someone has even wedged a rock into the sluice gate to hold it open, just to hear the rushing water.
Which violates the core agrarian rule of this valley. The text states, "The rice paddy is a paddy until it is not. And when the work stops, beware of what enters the empty field."
Beware of what enters.
Yeah. The children, they perceive the rushing water as a game,
Yeah.
but the environment perceives it as a direct insult.
And the moment the environment reacts is where the horror truly creeps in. Oba is standing on her veranda and she hears the third terrace, the literal mud terrace, clear its throat.
Such a visceral description.
It really is. It's described as this thick, low belch, like the sound a swamp makes when it swallows something it didn't want. And this fat bubble of gray muck rises up through the green stalks and just bursts.
Yeah.
And then the smell hits her. It's not pine or wet stone, which you'd expect in a nature setting. It's sulfur and the stench of a shallow grave.
It really forces us to recognize the rural setting as an active, judgmental character. It's not just a backdrop. And notice that Oba doesn't run.
Right, she just stands there.
Because running teaches the mountain that you fear it, and the mountain retains all its lessons.
Wow.
She simply yells at the children to get back to work and stands her ground until the correction takes root. She is actively raising these children to survive a world that is trying to swallow them.
Which we see at breakfast, too.
Yes, the breakfast scene.
She serves them rice, demanding they eat it before, I love this phrasing, before the rice forgets why it was cooked. And on top of each mound of rice is half of a boiled catfish head, with a blind eye just staring up at the rafters.
It is a deeply unsettling image.
It really is. But, if the environment is this main character dictating these harsh realities, the author can't just write a standard English sentence where the human is the central subject, right? Which brings us to the actual structure of the text.
The linguistic airlock.
Yes, this linguistic airlock. Because when I first hit those heavy black brackets in the source material, my brain almost short-circuited.
It's very jarring for a first-time reader.
Extremely. It felt like I was reading computer code, parsing a sentence before it finally let me have the normal prose. So what is all that about? Why is the author making me work so hard just to read the story?
Well, the author is forcing a very deliberate cognitive shift. The sequence inside those brackets, it begins with Japanese kanji.
Right, the actual characters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then it moves to romaji, which is the phonetic spelling. Then it provides a literal transliteration identifying the subject, the object, the verb in this very rigid syntax.
It feels very mechanical.
It does. And only after navigating all of that do you get the flowing English prose. And the reason is, if the text simply offered smooth English from the start, it would automatically apply Western analytical thought.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Western grammar generally places human agency at the center of the universe. I threw the ball, she locked the door. The human acts upon the world.
Okay.
But the airlock structure pulls you down into the deep somatic grammar of 19th century Japan, where the environment often acts first.
So it's an architectural choice to decenter the human.
Precisely.
I see the philosophy behind it, but I guess my question is, does it actually work in practice? Or does it just disrupt the narrative flow? Like, let's look at the moment Oba locks the door against the terrors outside.
Let's do it.
We start with the kanji, then we move to the romaji, and then we hit the English transliteration, which reads, door object, shut, bolt lowered, children of scream subject, night object split, eye topic, wood skin to cheek object draw near, and only after all that weird chunkiness do we get I lock the door on their screaming.
It deliberately disrupts your reading flow to force a physiological response. By reading the literal syntax first, you are forced to witness the action in the environment before you witness the actor.
Huh.
The philosophy embedded in the author's text notes explains it beautifully. It says, not the man carves the wood, rather the carving happens, and within it, a man appears.
Oh, wow. Within it, a man appears.
Exactly. The action exists independent of the human will. The human is just the vessel for the action.
That completely reframes how you read this. I mean, you physically cannot skim this text.
No, you can't.
You have to slow down and breathe with the rhythm of the grammar itself.
And that rhythm intentionally mimics the traditional performative pacing of Johaku.
Right, the pacing. Let's break that down for the listener.
Sure. So Johaku is a concept from traditional Japanese arts. Jo is the slow, deliberate gathering of energy. It's the preparation.
Like the kanji and the romaji.
Exactly. And then hapki is the fracturing break, the sudden acceleration.
The weird syntax transliteration.
Yes. And finally, Q is the rapid release, the flowing English prose. The linguistic airlocks bracket every single major movement in the story into that rising, fracturing, and releasing somatic loop.
It's exhausting but brilliant. And inside that meticulously structured frame, we have Oji telling this dark tale. Now, I want to address something right away. If you are listening and you hear 19th century Japanese demons and your mind instantly jumps to, like, colorful anime with spiky-haired heroes shouting magical attacks.
Yeah, hit the brakes on that.
Hit the brakes. This is completely different. I don't typically consume, a lot of Japanese cartoons or anime, and I want to assure you this is not that.
No, it is a crucial distinction to make. The Oni in this text are not magical goblins invading from some foreign dimension. They are the disowned shadow of the village itself.
The literal shadow.
Yes. They are the physical manifestation of the village's unwept tears, their unscreamed rages, and all their neglected duties just given raw physical form in the mud.
They are suppressed psychology weaponized.
Perfectly said.
And this psychology takes shape in a massive clash on the mountain ridge above the village. The ridge acts as a dohyo, a hidden circular ring cut from sky and mud. And two Oni meet here to make a wager, a keise, over the soul of the nameless craftsman down in the valley.
And these two Oni are terrifying. Surging up from the flooded terrace, we have Fukuro Oni, or the bag.
The bag.
Yes, and he embodies mass and momentum. He's described as a colossus of gray muck, roots, and drowned stalks. His element is Tsuchi, earth.
Right.
And he fights like a grand champion sumo wrestler, utilizing deishi, which is this grinding, constant forward footwork that literally drives the world ahead of him.
And his demand for the wager is it's so unsettling. He wants the craftsman to carve a woodblock so fine that every print struck from it becomes Fukuro's eyes in the land.
Yeah, surveillance network of grief.
Exactly, allowing him to witness every tantrum, every lie, every single piece of small cruelty that happens in the valley.
And facing him is the opposite extreme, Hagioni, the stripper, who condenses out of dust and dry splinters.
Dust and splinters, yeah.
If Fukuro is mass, Hagi is speed and leverage. Hagi is born from cutting insults and shouted jokes. And he wants the craftsman to carve a living statue of Hagi himself to command the craftsman's house while Hagi roams the land, stripping mortal souls their names and titles, leaving them as these empty husks just chasing outward meaning.
It's the ultimate battle of vanity versus vanity, but what really fascinated me is how this battle is actually fought, because they don't monologue their evil plans at each other. Right?
Yeah, not at all.
The sources explicitly state that in the dohyo, movement is the speech. They communicate purely through leverage and combat syntax. Hagioni fights using the principles of Aikido or Judo. When Fukuro surges forward to crush him, Hagi doesn't attempt to block the mass.
No, blocking mass with mass is a losing game. He uses eerie entering.
Right.
He slides off the center line. He becomes the open door instead of the solid wall. Fukuro attempts this crushing clinch, Yori, pouring raw, muddy weight down to break his opponent. But Hagi just folds and flows, denying the giant any solid line to push against.
It's exactly like when you try to push a heavy revolving door that someone else is simultaneously pulling.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. You throw your whole body weight into it, you meet absolutely zero resistance, and you just stumble past your own center of gravity.
Yes, and that is the kuzu, the off-balancing.
Yeah.
Hagi shifts slightly, and Fukuro's driving foot lands half on stone, half on empty air. His colossal mass surges right past his own base of support.
Which perfectly sets up the throw. Hagi drops his center of gravity, pivots his hips, and uses the mud giant's unstoppable forward momentum to just completely flip him over. And the text hits us with this highly specific sound jolt kanji, zushin.
And that moment, that zushin, is where the text does something incredible.
Oh, this part shattered my expectations.
It's brilliant.
At the exact moment Oji says the mud hit the terrace in the fable, this giant mud demon slamming into the earth, the physical floorboards under the family's nagahibachi lurch violently.
Yes.
The iron kettle rattles, ash literally jumps from the coals, an actual physical earthquake hits the house they're sitting in.
The timing is horrifying.
And the grandmother, Oba, she just grips the cedar doorframe and whispers, "The mud hit the terrace, and the earth felt it."
At that point, the barrier between the fable and reality dissolves entirely. The children aren't just listening to a story anymore, they're physically enduring the shockwaves of the Oni's movements.
Which is terrifying for a kid.
Oh, absolutely. And inside the myth, Hagioni capitalizes on that throw. He performs Hagu the stripping. He digs into the mud of Fukuro and steals the names, the glowing iron characters that make up Fukuro's essence.
And a flat, wooden plate shape pushes up from the mud in response, covered in these grooves that look like watching eyes. The wager is officially set.
It is.
Now, reading about this intense action with the shadows and the sudden earthquakes, I have to admit, I initially assumed I'd be looking at something akin to a visual novel.
I think a lot of modern readers make that assumption.
Yeah, because the sources mentioned there were 50 to 100 striking images associated with the text, and my modern brain just defaulted to, oh, it's a digital comic book format or a graphic novel.
Right. But the aesthetics are entirely analog and deeply performative. It is a simulated kagi, which is a traditional shadow play embedded within the storytelling itself.
So it's not illustrations on a page, per se.
Well, the visual plates described are a blend of gritty realism and dark ukiyo-e, the traditional Japanese woodblock prints. But they are meant to evoke the feeling of this live performance.
Right, because Oba is sitting behind the translucent paper of the shoji screen in the room, and she's using her articulated hands near an oil lamp to cast these bending, terrifying shadows of the Oni for the kids, while Oji narrates from the dark.
Exactly. The plates themselves serve as a registry for this live presentation. They synchronize visual jolts with the linguistic jolts of the text we talked about earlier.
It's so atmospheric. I'm picturing the plate where Oba is writing her letter by the veranda. She's perfectly still, everything is serene, while out in the vibrant green patties, that single, highly textured gray mud bubble is just bursting.
The contrast there is key. The rigid domestic stillness versus the chaotic, bubbling thread of the environment. That is a hallmark of the ukiyo-e style used here.
It's beautiful but disturbing.
Very. We also see the horrifying visual of the sucking of the sack, where the craftsman's wife, her face completely split in raw resentment, is pulled into a bag woven entirely of grief threads.
That image stuck with me.
Or the shaving statue rising in the dark workshop later on. These aren't images meant for rapid consumption on a glowing screen. They are meant to burn into your retina in a dark, smoky room.
It's a complete sensory assault. But, beneath the shadows and the mud demons and the grammar tricks, what are we actually supposed to get out of this?
That's the real question.
Because, if this is a self-help book wrapped in horror, it's a really terrifying one. What do you mean when you say it teaches a lesson?
Well, it functions as a profound psychological teaching tool. But I should clarify, it is certainly not in the Western 5 steps to a happier you tradition.
Right, no checklist here.
No. The central conflict of both the fable and the valley itself is the agonizing tension between Giri and Ninjo.
Okay, let's break those two concepts down because they are basically the engine of this entire tragedy.
Right. So Giri is duty. It encompasses social obligation, the heavy burden of what you owe to your community, your family, and your specific role in society.
The expectations placed on you from the outside.
Yes. And Ninjo is human feeling. It is your inner world. Your personal sorrow, your secret desires, your raw, unfiltered emotions.
The inside weather.
Exactly. Now, the tragedy of the nameless craftsman in the story is that he allowed himself to be consumed entirely by Giri.
He only served the village's needs, and by doing so, he completely hollowed himself out.
Right. Oji tells the grandchildren that people brought the craftsman raw wood and raw suffering, and in return, he carved them psychological defenses.
These are the 6 gifts, right? Though we only really focus heavily on the first 5 in the text. The villagers essentially outsourced their trauma to his workbench.
They absolutely did. And the correlation between the type of suffering they brought, the specific wood chosen, and the object carved It's just a brilliant psychological study.
It really is. Let's go through them because they blew my mind.
Okay, so first, the timid and the ashamed arrived at his door bringing light cedar wood. And for them, he carved men masks.
So think about that. The coward puts on this lightweight cedar mask and suddenly gains terrifying courage. It's the literal adoption of a persona, right?
Yes.
You take a lightweight material and use it to project this heavy, intimidating presence, completely hiding the fragile ego behind it.
And the village sees this miracle, and they give him a title. They name him Menshi, the mask maker.
But there's a cost, because simultaneously his wife gives birth to a child. But the child is given no name, only a single syllable spoken in the dark.
Because all his identity is being poured into the village, not his family.
Exactly. Okay, what was the second gift?
Second, the grieving mothers and widows came to him. They brought weeping willow. They were just crushed by the weight of their loss. So he carved karakuri puppets.
This one hit me so hard. Willow is flexible, it yields. When a mother pulls the strings of the puppet, she is pouring her paralyzed soul into the wood. The puppet dances and basically feels the grief for her.
It is a masterclass in dissociation.
Right. The trauma is just too much for the human nervous system to process directly, so she externalizes it into a proxy.
And for this, he becomes Karakurishi, the puppet maker.
And a second unnamed child is born into his neglected house.
Then third came the chaotic and the overwhelmed, bringing unyielding Unuk. And for them, he carved suku desks. Heavy geometric surfaces.
Wait, let's pause on the desks for the chaotic. That is just a perfect metaphor for intellectualization, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Taking messy, chaotic, sprawling trauma and forcing it into neat, square wooden drawers. It's cognitive compartmentalization happening in a 19th century fable. The madman places his hands on the oak grain, and the madness literally stops at the rim of the desk.
He imposes order on the chaos, so he becomes Tsukushi, the desk maker, and we get a third unnamed child.
Man. Okay, fourth.
Fourth came the silenced, those whose tongues had been metaphorically severed by trauma. They brought bamboo and horsehair, and he carved feud brushes. But he didn't carve them a voice. He carved them a bleed.
Bleed.
The terror rushed down their arms and bled out in black ink.
Slashing their dangerous truths onto rice paper. It's expressive therapy, but it's driven by pure desperation. And for that, he becomes Fuchi, the brush maker. Fourth unnamed child is born.
Finally, the drifting came. Those who survived floods but lost their gravity, constantly fearing they would just float away. Wood was too light for them, so he took deep earth stone, and he carved Butsu statues.
The sheer weight of the rock grounds the traumatized, basically bolting them to the floor of the world. It's physical grounding for the disassociated.
Exactly. He becomes Butsushi, the statue maker, and the fifth unnamed child is born.
So the craftsman has accumulated these 5 great achievements and 5 heavy titles from the village.
But in living exclusively for Giri, for that external duty, he has completely neglected his own ninjo. He has no face of his own anymore.
He's just a collection of titles.
Right. And when a culture builds its peace by pushing all its collective pain into wooden blocks and silent stones, the field grows incredibly heavy. The Wabat harmony we talked about thickens with unwept tears. The Paddy literally calls to the dark to balance the ledger.
Which is exactly the invitation the Oni needed to attack. Hagioni bursts into the workshop and systematically peels those 5 titles right off the craftsman's shoulders.
It's a brutal scene. The mask goes dead, the puppet slumps over, the desk spills, the brush dries up, and the stone loses its gravity.
The craftsman is left raw and screaming without a sound, and he's ordered to carve a living statue of Hagi's vanity out of black demon pine by dawn.
While Fukuro Oni demands the all-seeing woodblock.
Yeah.
And remember, without the father's borrowed power, all those psychological defenses out in the village collapse at once.
The trauma all comes rushing back.
Yes, and inside his own house, the 5 unnamed children devolve into frantic, thrashing animals. The wife steps out, she witnesses her husband stripped of everything, she sees her children shattering the house, and 20 years of her own repressed ninjo finally snaps.
That's when her face splits in that horrifying scream we saw in the visual plates, and Fukuro Oni's bag just opens up. She and the 5 children are sucked into the woven grief threads. The door slams. The craftsman is left entirely alone in the empty workshop.
And this is the moment Oji pauses the fable to test the grandchildren around the fire.
Right, but he doesn't ask them what the story means intellectually, like a teacher would. He asks them where they felt it.
Which introduces 2 vital somatic concepts to the listener. Kibun, and kimochi.
Okay, let's explain those.
Kibun refers to the overall weather or mood in the room. It's atmospheric, like when you walk into a room after an argument and you can just feel the tension.
The vibe, basically.
Yeah, the vibe. Kimochi, on the other hand, is the sharp, specific, localized hit felt inside the physical body.
Like a gut punch.
Exactly. So Oji asked the kids, when Hagi stripped the names, was it kibun or kimochi?
And the kids physically touch their chest and say, kimochi, like losing air right here. It's exactly like modern somatic therapy, tracking where your throat tightens or your stomach drops when you're stressed, but it's contextualized within this terrifying ancient myth.
He is ensuring they map their physical reactions to the trauma of the story so they recognize it in real life.
Wow. And inside the myth, at this exact moment, the craftsman is standing in what the text calls ma.
Ma is a critical concept here. It's the interval, the negative space. It is the silent gap between the loss and the coming dawn, where nothing has yet decided what it will become.
The pause between breaths.
Yes. The craftsman looks into this gap and finally understands that Wa harmony is not a reward for good behavior. It is an open, hungry mouth waiting to be fed with exact, deliberate action.
So what does he do? Because he's lost everything.
He refuses to weep. He refuses to just give up. He chooses the one thing the Oni didn't think was worth stealing. His internal giri, his family honor, which he kept even without a title. He takes up the chisel and chooses to carve from, quote, what remains.
He recalls an old, nameless, itinerant carver from his youth who asked for no titles but made wood breathe.
Right, just a pure worker.
And he begins to carve a humble tribute to that worker.
But the black demon pine fiercely resists the chisel. And the terrible irony of this scene is that Hagioni's invisible vanity is in the room with him, actively stripping away every finished curve the craftsman makes, shaving it back into a curl of wood, believing he is asserting his dominance.
But in the Ma, nothing wasted is ever only waste.
Exactly.
The strippings fall into the corner and they begin to accumulate. The craftsman is focusing entirely on carving the humble worker, but the vain demon, through its own destructive interference, is accidentally carving its own cage.
It's poetic justice.
A shaving statue rises from the discarded splinters. It becomes this exact, jagged, oily mirror of Hagi's own greed.
So as dawn breaks and sun hits the paper screen, the Oni rush in to claim their prize. Hagi looks and he sees the woodblock for Fukuro, and he sees the humble statue of the old worker. He is furious. He demands his god image.
But then the shaving statue steps out of the shadows.
Yes, it reaches for Hagi, perfectly matching his movements. The weight of the man's relentless labor has been transfigured into a mirror, and Hagi is completely stalemated by his own theft.
The debts are balanced by sheer physical impossibility. The Oni are forced to withdraw from the sunlight. The bag goes clear, and the wife and children step back into the room. And they don't look for the titles of a master anymore. They just look at the raw, trembling hands of a man who is still holding the tool.
And this is when the true lesson hits the children sitting around the Nagabachi.
Because they realize the fable is actually a genealogy.
Yes. The 5 unnamed children in the story. They grew up to be their fathers, mothers, aunts, and uncles. They are the direct descendants of this profound survival.
The lesson crystallizes for them. You are not your names. You are your soul. Names and titles are just outer weather. They're provisional and easily stripped away by the world.
The true answers are never hidden in what was taken from you. They wait humbly inside what remains.
It completely recontextualizes the entire deep dive. It's just brilliant. Which leaves us with the epilogue, which closes the ledger on this incredible source material.
It's a stunning final image.
We jump forward 10 winters later. Oji is now in his 80s. His wife, Oba, has sadly passed away. And he climbs the steep goat path up to the ridge, the site of the old doyo, under out-of-season cherry blossoms.
The Sakura.
Right. And his daughter has packed his lunchbox.
And when he lifts the cedar lid, he finds the boiled head of the catfish. But it's changed.
At the beginning of our exploration, the catfish's eye was blind, just staring blankly.
Right, but now the eye is open, clear, and seeing.
What does that signify?
It signifies that his lifetime of grueling devotion, his daily payment of the Kari debt, has finally balanced the ledger of Wa. He has paid what he owed to the mountain.
And as he sits under the falling petals, he looks through the clear lens of that fisheye, and he is granted a vision of the future.
A very grim vision.
Yeah. He sees a distant land of gray concrete and iron cages, a frantic, crowded world where humanity has once again split its relations, distancing themselves behind walls and completely forgetting how to listen.
Because the Onis are never truly destroyed. The world's ledger is always balancing itself, and energy is only ever displaced. The Oni feed on the massive gap of tension on the fulcrum between people.
Which leaves us with a final provocative question for you listening. Look closely at your own modern life. Look at the arguments, the distances you maintain, the unwept tears, and the unscreamed rages you carry around every day.
We all have them.
We do. If the Oni feed on that massive gap of tension, what kind of modern concrete Oni is currently bubbling up in the neglected fields of your own daily life?
Something to think about next time you check your phone instead of talking to the person next to you.
Exactly. Thank you for taking this intense journey with us into the deep. Keep questioning the world around you and pay attention to what might be rising from the empty fields.